So, welcome to Envol StartLine Ready. We actually ran this session yesterday to a bigger group, and it took us a little over 70 minutes. So we're going to try and do a condensed version this evening, so we can share this to a broader audience. And so, Nico, tell us a little bit about what is Envol StartLine Ready, and then you can hand it over to Coach Max.
Envol StartLine Ready is a group coaching. We regrouping people who have the same interest for the same race or who have going for kind of the same goal. This group, this marathon group, we will aim for a marathon at the end of the year, during the last quarter of the year. And we will regroup people on the WhatsApp group, and the coach will be there on the WhatsApp group to give a lot of tips and to be there to answer questions, but also to do a live call once a month. And also it will be a training plan for everybody, something quite generic, but it will be lots of options for people like this they can choose. And yeah, to be in contact with the coach on the WhatsApp groups. I mean, this is and with the other athletes, this is really good for the motivation and the inspiration.
Nico, do you want to speak a bit about what Envol is and what it stands, what the company stands to do?
Exactly. Yep. Well, envol in French means take off. Like you can see on the logo, you can see the shuttle taking off. And then this is basically we're taking you from your level, and we're making you a better athlete or better swim runner or better runner, swimmer. It's a coaching business. We are based in our headquarters are in Stockholm, Sweden, and this coaching business is based around the activity of swimrun, the sport of swimrun. It's a sport born in Sweden in beginning of the 2000s. But we also have a lots of in our community. We are in more than 30 countries, and in our community we have people they are more swimmer, more runner. Some people are only swim runners. Some people they never done any swim run yet, but they aiming for their first swim run. We try to take everybody in this community from beginner to world champions, and we try to make you improve and to make you reach your goals. And for sure, I mean, in this community, I mean, in the swim run community, we have lots of people. They also do some only some running race, like marathon race, and that's why we know there is some demand for some quality, really good marathon training plan and training inspiration, and that's why we decided to start this StartLine Ready for marathon.
Yeah, I myself am a triathlete, and I'm a big believer in the fact that for multi-sport athletes, one of the biggest advantages to being a multi-sport athlete is access to so many different forms of competition. If you're a swim runner, you have the option to compete in swim run events. You have the option to compete in swim only events. You have the option to compete in road running events, trail running events, because your daily training is adapted to be able to quickly ramp into competition shape for all of those different disciplines. So for many swim runners, it doesn't take too much kind of lost that thought along the way, but I was going to say for many swim runners, the option of racing a marathon is relatively adjacent with year in, year out goals in swim run. And it's also true that spending a dedicated portion of a year, nearly an entire year, if you're with this group from start to finish, focusing on marathon fitness and marathon potential will improve many facets of your swim run performance as well. This group is also open to pure runners, as we'll get into in just a couple minutes. One of the big principles of the group is that we have a strong cross-training component very frequently, with the option to do 50% of the weekly aerobic training volume as non-running activities. We believe in this, and I believe in this, that this organization of the training is beneficial to your performance regardless of your background. But obviously, swim runners and multi-sport athletes, they're already integrating training into, or already integrating multiple disciplines into their training on a regular basis. So it would be a very easy plan for them to follow in terms of the types of training that they're used to, at least within the activity. In terms of the specific sessions, there might be some new things for many people. But really excited to be heading this group, where hopefully we'll have athletes of all sorts of backgrounds. The group is mainly designed for marathoners in sort of the 3-hour flat to 3-hour 45 range or so. Basically speaking, for runners who are a bit slower than that, the main benefit to them is just going to be continue to develop as a runner at their own pace, and simply sort of doing any activity will see massive gains in their performance as they start their marathon journey. And for athletes who are a bit faster than 3 hours flat, it's possible that some more individualized one-on-one coaching might be a better option for them, just because their goals are a little bit more intensive and are going to require some more intentional training. So with Envol and through myself, we are happy to offer one-on-one coaching as well. But for athletes who are shooting to run 3 hours, 3 hours 20, 3 hours 30, 3 hours 40, anything in there, this group is going to be a really great option. As Nico said, the plan is going to be the same relatively for everyone, but we're going to have options to tailor it to the level of volume that you're used to, the type of athlete that you are. If you're a pure runner who doesn't really like to cross train, although that will be recommended. If you're already used to doing a very high amount of cross training relative to pure running, there are going to be options for you. So this group is really open. We're trying to make it open to as large of a group of people as.
Max, when we say cross training, we mean not running. So swimming is cross training. Could be biking. Yes. Could be things.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. What those details look like a little bit more as we continue to speak more about what participation in the group is going to look like and what training we're going to take you through this entire year. So also, I guess not yet mentioned is the fact that this group is designed for athletes targeting a marathon race in the final quarter of the year 2025. This group was originally born out of an idea between myself and Tom, who will be racing in Valencia the first week of December, as I believe Nico is as well. And we wanted to create a group training environment for other athletes who will be racing at a similar point in the year. And one of the biggest advantages that we believe the group provides to athletes who will be competing at that point in time in the marathon is that we have a very wide range of time to help you get prepared. The crucial difference between this group or the training that will be a part of this group and a marathon plan, of which there are hundreds available on the internet, is that those training plans work very well if you are already in a condition to receive and put your body through marathon training. But for many amateur athletes who are above the 3-hour level in the marathon, they lack the foundation that makes that training really applicable to them. For this group, we're going to give you a foundation that on principle we believe in very strongly, and that's going to be the first really 6 months of participation in the group. When we get to the late summer, early fall, depending on when a given athlete's race is, as I said, this group is open to anyone who's racing in the final quarter of 2025, whether that's a race in, well, I guess past even the final quarter, whether that's a marathon in September, October, November, or December. The last 8 to 10 weeks of the program will be some slightly more traditional marathon-specific training to get you ready and dialed in at marathon pace, marathon effort, and might include a bit more percentage of running than cross-training, like we'll see earlier in the year. But again, the crucial difference between training as a part of this group and training off of a generic marathon plan is that those plans do not really include a foundation to get you ready for the more aerobically intensive and volume intensive sessions that highlight typical marathon training. Sorry. So a bit about myself. My name is Max Frankel. I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and I've been coaching athletes for the marathon since 2020. I came to coaching with a bit of an unorthodox path. I was an elite mountain biker from a very young age, and I came to running actually as cross training for mountain biking when I was in high school in Richmond, Virginia, in the United States. After slightly switching focus to running around the age of 17, I ran 8:55 for 3,000 meters and went off to go run in college. I got injured very shortly into my career in the NCAA, and I switched focus to road cycling, where I moved to Boulder, Colorado, where I now live, to pursue a professional career on the bike. But when I stopped running, even though I became a full-time professional athlete with a very high training load, running itself and my love of running really left a significant hole in my life. So I devoted myself to basically learning everything that I could about making other people's running journeys better, faster, stronger, maybe ward off some of the mistakes that I made in my short career as an elite runner. And yeah, since then, I've coached multiple athletes to sub 2:20 performances in the marathon. I've coached, I think, either 10 or 11 ultra marathon wins in the United States and in Europe, at distances from 30K up to 100 miles or 160K. And then on the amateur side, or the non-elite, sub-elite side, I've coached many athletes to Boston Marathon qualifying times, Ironman 70.3 World Championship berths, and Ironman World Championship berths. So really excited to continue expanding my services to more athletes. And my true love as a coach really is the marathon. So very much looking forward to spending some time with a group of folks dedicated to improving their performance at that distance. So as I mentioned just briefly, there are many advantages to targeting a race in, not necessarily in the fourth quarter of the year, but targeting a marathon that is about 9 to 12 months away from when you really start thinking about your training for that race. And one of those reasons that is not necessarily too common or too well known to many amateur runners is because they see a lot of people look at what elite marathoners and professional marathoners are doing, and they see that they are only doing marathon specific preparation for 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. But the reason why is because those athletes have such a massive foundation, and they've spent years training across all zones, building their power curve up to a very robust level, so that they can truly handle marathon training. So one of the goals of the foundational period of training as a part of this group is going to be building that robust power curve. And what I mean by robust power curve really is be able to express a fair amount of true speed that is many degrees away from how fast you're trying to run your goal marathon. So if you look at this table right here, this table, according to the Jack Daniels running calculator, shows aerobically equivalent performances to a just sub 3-hour marathon. So you can see that if one is trying to run a 2:59 marathon, that is aerobically equivalent as a performance to running a 5:29 mile or a 5:01 1,500 meter. But many athletes, especially amateur runners who come to the sport later in life without a background in athletics or track and field at a young age, or at the high school level, at the college level even, they can achieve relatively high levels of aerobic fitness, but their aerobic fitness is derived from a really high quantity of base mileage, essentially. So if someone is trying to run a marathon at 4:16 km pace, chances are, if they're in their 30s or 40s, they have gotten to that fitness level by running so many kilometers in 4:30, 4:40, 4:50, 5 flat, etc. The chances are relatively low that such an individual has ever moved their body very significantly at 3:20 km pace. And ask any middle distance athlete, and they will tell you that mile pace is considerably slower than what they can do in an all-out sprint. So if many of these athletes who are attempting to run 4:16 km pace for a full 3 hours nearly have very little familiarity moving their body at 3:20 km pace, much less what might resemble a sprint to them, which is 2:50, 2:55, 3 flat kilometer pace. There are many advantages to your marathon performance to be gained simply from spending a little bit of time developing some competency at those paces or those power outputs. One of the biggest advantages is biomechanical efficiency. At faster speeds, it's not impossible to run poorly, but it's much, much, much more difficult to run with relatively poor economy and improper firing patterns. For this athlete that's running 4:15 km pace for their marathon, if they get to that level of aerobic fitness via a large quantity of 4:40 kilometers, there's a much higher likelihood that those 4:40 kilometers will run at poor pace than any work they might then do at 3:20 km pace. The reason being, if you're turning the screws and sort of lighting the fire underneath, underneath the athlete, in order to put out more power, it's much more difficult to find power using improper mechanics. So one of the things that we'll do to develop this power and speed is we're going to put athletes on hills. When running up a hill, it's much easier to find power using the right biomechanical systems, power from the glutes, power from the hips, and athletes are going to be less likely to run into many common problems such as overstriding, heel striking, or understriding. These things are not necessarily bad to themselves, but poor economy is a big symptom of not having a lot of experience moving the body with speed. And even if economy is relatively good, simply that lack of familiarity with speed is going to, and going from a lack of familiarity with speed to a basic competency with speed is going to have massive advantages to marathon performance. Similarly, it's going to improve strength, the right places, the right pieces of the running musculature. It's very easy to run slowly. And for anyone, let's be honest, for anyone, marathon pace is and should be a relatively slow pace relative to a maximal power recruitment effort or maximal aerobic effort, like a mile or a 3,000 meter race. So running slowly, it's much easier to use incorrect firing patterns, incorrect musculature. Running quickly, it's much more difficult. So by running quickly, we're going to improve strength in the right pieces of the running musculature. Another advantage is that at all efforts, even for an ultra marathon, there's an anaerobic contribution to purely what is on face value a purely aerobic effort. When athletes get fully fatigued and they fully fatigue out of a system of muscle fibers, anaerobic competency, as I'd say, plays a role in allowing them to continue to resist fatigue and stop from hitting the wall, as athletes very commonly do in the marathon distance. Additionally, by incorporating speed work very early on in the marathon buildup, it allows for greater, if not at the very least, the same performance advantages of just hammering aerobic volume at a much lower injury rate and a much lower overall volume. It's not that aerobic volume does not continue to make runners better at the marathon distance. It often does, but it might not be the most optimal method for improvement, especially in a timely fashion. Couple other notes on sort of why this speed base, as we're calling it, is so beneficial to the marathon, is that once athletes gain some basic competency at speed, that stays with them forever as long as they do a little bit to maintain it. It's much easier to maintain it than to grow it. An example that I like to use is that marathon legend Eliud Kipchoge ran a 3:33 1500 meters in 2002, which was 16 years or 15 years before we first set a marathon world record. 3:33 1500 meter pace is, what can I not do math, about 2:20, 2:22 kilometer pace. And he was then able to run 2:50 kilometer pace for a little over 2 hours 15 years later. One of the reasons that such a feat was possible was because he had a significant delta between what he was capable of putting out for a couple minutes and what he's able of putting out for a couple hours. And lastly, and possibly the biggest reason why such a foundation is incredibly beneficial for the marathon, is that if an athlete can demonstrate competency or potential at one of these values in this table for any given marathon target, that means that marathon target or any of the other targets on the table are going to be much more achievable. It's much more difficult to run a 2:59 marathon if you're not also capable of running a 1:26 half marathon or a 38:59 10K. If you are capable of running some of the equivalent marks at shorter distances, the body is going to be much more prepared to then up the aerobic side of the fitness in order to reach that equivalent performance in the marathon. So once this power curve gets built out and maximal power, both in a sprint, and maximal aerobic power, which is peak power at the top of the aerobic system, which generally tends to be about a 5 or a 6 minute effort. So for some athletes, that's a 2,000 meter effort. For some athletes, that's a 100 meter effort. But building that power curve becomes much easier to go down the curve and improve performance at marathon pace, marathon power, if you use the stride power meter, etc. Gentlemen, have anything to add to that so far?
So far, so good. It makes sense to me.
So we're going to have some key milestones and checkpoints along the way. In service of the philosophy that I just went over, we're going to have a spring speed-based phase where most of our quality sessions are going to be focused on developing speed and power. In the summer, early summer, and end of the spring, we're going to have a transition period where work on speed and power is going to become a little bit more aerobically applicable in threshold and VO2 max zones, zone 4 and zone 5, instead of zone 6 and zone 7 in the speed-based phase. And then as athletes get through the summer and their race dates approaching, we're going to trigger an 8 to 10 week end game marathon specific block, which is going to much more closely resemble traditional marathon training. We're still going to leave some speed sessions in there, but this is where you're really going to be able to put the foundation that we've built to good use. As I mentioned earlier, the group is going to have a very strong emphasis on cross training. This is not just because this is a group presented by a swimrun organization, and we want to be able to cater to multi-sport athletes, but also because we believe that this is philosophically very beneficial for really all athletes training for the marathon. Volume does matter, and a lot of people think that volume matters more than anything else. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely right. Volume does matter, but it matters how you're doing it. If you are destroying yourself purely running an absolute ton of volume, it's going to impede your ability to execute on the faster sessions. Even if your faster sessions are only touching zone 4, it's going to be much harder to run a threshold session in zone 4 on a Tuesday if you're running 35K or running 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours as your long run on Saturday or Sunday. And for most of the athletes who will be sort of in the range of this group, 3 hours plus, those athletes are probably undeveloped enough where those faster sessions are going to move the needle on their performance much more than the pure long sessions. So we want to think about every single week every session is important, but we still want to keep an eye on what session is going to make the biggest difference to my performance. And for most of the athletes in this group, we believe that that's going to be the Tuesday and Friday quality sessions. Really, the Tuesday session is going to be probably the most important because it's going to be the session that incorporates training the athletes are least familiar with, which means that there's going to be the most meat on the bone for those athletes to improve. And by running to the point that you are stuck on the couch for 24 hours over the weekend, you're really going to impede your ability to receive any benefit from that first quality session of the week. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to feature lots of cross-training opportunities, specifically with an emphasis on non-impact cross-training like swimming and cycling. There are some impact-based cross-training activities that are really good. I think pickup football, soccer here in the United States, pickup basketball, hiking, those are fantastic cross-training activities for slightly different reasons. But those are still impact and loading the running musculature, or at least a large majority of it. By going non-impact and getting in the pool, getting on the bike, we're able to build that aerobic capacity, keep ourselves in the right zone. If we're tired, it's really difficult to stay in zone 2 heart rate while running. But it's much easier to keep the intensity low. When you're on the bike, you can just spin it out real easy. When you're in the pool, you can keep it at a walking effort. So we're going to feature lots of cross-training opportunities for everyone. We are going to have some pure runners in the group, so we understand that not everyone is going to jump at all the opportunities to cross-train. But the way we're going to assign the cross-training is that there's going to be the option to make about 50% of the weekly aerobic volume running and 50% non-running. And for the more runner-focused athletes, they can bring that up to sort of 60-40 running versus cross-training, maybe 70-30. But we do encourage everyone that they cross-train, specifically on their long days and their aerobic-based maintenance days. So what does the training look like? Day to day, we have 2 quality run workouts per week, and then we also have 1 long aerobic day. Ideally, the long aerobic day is going to be a combination of running and cross-training, rather than really push hour 40, 2-hour long runs, especially early in the block or early in the entire training cycle. We're really going to encourage athletes to go for a relatively longer run on their long aerobic day, but then supplement it with cross-training. Go for a run, and on this day, the impact cross-training is also a good idea. So go for a slightly longer run, go for a hike, go for a cycle, go for a swim, and that's going to keep making those easy aerobic benefits grow the mitochondria without absolutely beating you down and taking you out of commission to really hit it hard on Tuesday. Week to week, we're going to have several repeating mesocycles through the year. There's going to be similar workouts and structure repeated week to week we're not really trying to have progressive overload. We're trying to feel good pretty much all the time, at least up until the final 8 to 10 weeks of marathon specific prep. And we're going to keep the focus on quality. We really, as I've mentioned, we really don't want to do too much aerobic volume, even if it's not just all on the long day, even if it's just day to day inside the week. We don't want to do too much aerobic volume to the point that it hampers the ability to execute key sessions. So Nico, if you really want to run those hill sprints fast, man, you gotta chill on those 150K weeks. But I know that's not what you want to do. We'll just see what happens. We'll see how those first few zone 7 sessions feel while still running 150 Ks, and then maybe you'll come around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's everybody's different, and let's see how it goes. Let's see how I think the recovery is important after this zone 7 really fast short sessions, and which are necessary, because I really believe in this concept, in this journey to marathon. Then I think the most important is to recover, and yeah, not to overload, and to be able, yeah, to do some good quality session. Then yeah, it's probably different for different people. Some people might need a 0 kilometer of running the day after a quality session and just do some cross training, but for some other, just doing a 30-minute run or 60-minute run really easy in zone 1 might be working too. Then let's see, and let's see what's worked for me, what's worked for the others.
And that's exactly one of the things, one of the reasons why we believe in the cross training so much, and why we believe in offering athletes options on so many days of the training, so that people can listen to their bodies. And our goal of the group is to just make sure that everyone is ready when the quality session rolls around, whether that's on Tuesday or Friday. So as I said, just briefly recapping, we're going through a spring power development speed-based mesocycle, and then in the early summer going through a VO2 max mesocycle, and then we have our marathon specific end game mesocycle. Might be 10, might be 10, sorry, might be 8, might be 10, might be 12 weeks, depending on where your race is in the fall. Let's take a look at what a typical week of training is going to look like. So as I've said many times so far, we're going to have lots and lots of cross-training opportunities for athletes. So we have a couple days that look pretty similar. Mondays and Thursdays are similar. Tuesdays and Fridays are similar. Wednesdays and Sundays are similar. And then on Saturdays, we have a long aerobic day. So taking us through the week, Monday, we have our first of 2 recovery days. And that's sort of any or none of the 3 options. 30 minutes or so, easy run by feel, zone 1 effort, up to 90 minutes of non-impact cross training, swimming, cycling, etc., or off. Or it could be a run and some cross training. It could be just some cross training. It could be off. It could be just a run. It could be really any or multiple of those 3 options. On Tuesday, we have our first quality run session. For the first mesocycle, this would be zone 6, zone 7. So a couple examples of what those sessions will look like would be 10 times 12-second max effort hill repeats on full recovery, so 5 or more minutes in between. The reason why we're taking so much recovery is because in developing this power and full power recruitment, we really need to get the body as recovered as possible before going to the next one. So many athletes, especially endurance athletes, are used to doing a series of efforts where, as a result of the previous effort, the next effort gets harder and harder, and the perceived effort might go up a little bit. The heart rate will continue to rise. We want to do something quite different with these zone 6 and zone 7 workouts, especially the pure sprint stuff, these really, really short efforts. Our goal of such a long recovery is that the athlete will get so recovered in that period that they can hit the second rep as hard as they hit the first rep. Same amount of power output, same speed, etc. And then again, all the way up to the 8th, 9th, 10th rep, we want those to be as close in peak power and speed to the very first effort. An example of a more zone 6, slightly lower intensity workout than pure sprint is 8 times 45 seconds, about 98% max effort, hill repeats on 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes of recovery. So with that recovery, we're not trying to take all day, but we're not trying to keep the pressure on as we just make our way back down the hill. Wednesday is our first of 2 aerobic-based development and maintenance days. We have up to 60 minutes of easy running, up to 90 minutes of non-impact cross training, or both if you're feeling ambitious. And for athletes who are used to running a very, very high volume or very high training volume, even if it's not ultra running, there is the option to maybe do a little bit more than this, maybe 70 minutes, maybe 80 minutes of easy running, maybe 2 hours of non-impact cross training. We shall see. Thursday, same thing as Monday, recovery day, any or multiple of those 3 options. Friday, we have our quality run session number 2. So in the first mesocycle, this would be more high aerobic, either zone 4 threshold or zone 5 VO2 max. So if Tuesday is pure sprint, zone 7, Friday will be zone 4. If Tuesday is zone 6, Friday might be zone 5. Examples of what these workouts would look like is something like 10 times 300 meters at VO2 max effort on 1-to-1 work rest ratio. So if you're running those 300s at 320K pace in a minute, 60 seconds, then you'll get 60 seconds of rest. You also have 90-second broken hill efforts, some slightly mix of paces inside those 90 seconds, pretty long recovery on those. 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off, threshold effort, or progressive fartlek on 1-to-1 equivalent work rest ratio as well. So that could be like 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, and then back down the ladder as well. Keeping that 1-to-1 work rest ratio. As we're developing threshold inside the first mesocycle, given that our real focus is on that Tuesday session, we're not trying to push the limits on the more aerobic session on Friday. As we get further into the training block, we get into the summer, and then especially the marathon specific phase, any work that we do at or maybe a little bit above or below threshold will probably have some shorter rest than it will in this first period. On Saturday, we have our long aerobic session or sessions, and like the aerobic base days, this is either run and cross train, or just cross train. The goal volume increases the higher amount of cross training. So if you're willing to do 3 hours of cross training and an hour of running to get 4 hours total, that's great. But we're not going to have anyone do 2 hours of running. The distance of the long run itself, for most people in the first cycle, probably going to top out at about 80, maybe 90 minutes. But if you want to go for a hike, go for a cycle, go for a swim after that, to even get in 2, 3 more hours of training, via cross training, that's totally fine and all the more beneficial. Sunday is similar to Wednesday, just aerobic based development, maintenance, up to 60 minutes of running, up to 90 minutes of cross training. So that's what a typical week's going to look like. And as I said, as we go through the year, the typical structure will remain. We are still going to have recovery days on Mondays and Thursdays, aerobic based development days on Wednesdays and Sundays, quality sessions on Tuesdays and Fridays, and a long session on Saturday. The contents of the specific days might change a little bit, but the overall structure will remain the same throughout the year. So as I said a little bit earlier, the group is really designed for people who have some experience in the marathon, but are still probably a bit over 3 hours in their target. I think as we've discussed the group training, we want to sort of keep everyone relatively similar. So the training that works for a 2:55 marathoner won't necessarily be the best training for a 4:30 marathoner. And because everyone in the group is going to receive the same quality sessions, we want everyone to be in a relatively close range. So we're thinking about 3 hours, 3 hours 40. But this is open to many athletes of different training history. It could be someone who's going back to that power curve example that I made earlier with the table. Someone can be ready to approach a 2:59 marathon at a very young age via a 5 flat or a sub 5 minute 1500 meter time, right? They decide they want to just jump straight into the marathon, or they can have run so many 5 flat kilometers over their lives, they decide they want to try and shoot for a 3:10, 3:20 marathon. So there's so many different ways to sort of get to even the same fitness level in the marathon, and we want the group to be accessible to all. And with that said, different runners can reach the same goal with different amounts of training. It's going to take, for someone who's approaching with a more aerobic training history, it's going to take probably maybe more mileage, maybe more volume they might want to do than someone who's coming at it, a young athlete who's been running track and field in school. They've already sort of run some middle distance events. They might benefit more from slightly lower volume. So the group is going to work for many different scenarios. Either way, the overall approach is the same. And when people sign up, we want them to be as specific as possible when they fill out the onboarding forms so that we can make the best coaching decisions. Additionally, if the idea of this sounds attractive to you, but you don't have a fall marathon in mind, you don't need to be set on a certain race yet. Myself and either Tom or Nico, if you're more local to either France or Sweden, we're more than happy to help you choose a goal race as well. But as Nico said in the beginning, maybe the biggest advantage in choosing to be a part of the training group is that it's a big opportunity for community, camaraderie, and support from both the coach, myself, and the other athletes in the group. To be around people with a focused collective goal and really essentially be teammates with them is incredibly motivating and really, I think, sometimes makes you feel part of something bigger than yourself, and knowing that others are on the journey with you is an invaluable experience. As Nico said, we'll have a WhatsApp group where I will be answering questions. We'll have monthly webinar calls with everyone in the group. And yeah, as we go through the year, we'll lean on our teammates to work through plateaus, celebrate small wins in training. And the goal of the training, it's a baseball metaphor, American sport, but it was said by a European athlete, Josh Kerr, the British middle distance runner. He said he wants to hit singles every day. Don't want to absolutely smash ourselves in training and go way too hard on one day, only to sit on the couch the next day, the next several days. We also don't want to just be on the couch the whole time. We just want to be applying a consistent amount of moderate pressure through the year. And as every successful athlete and coach knows, there is no real secret. The secret is not do this session and your marathon will improve. Be able to run for 3 hours and your marathon will improve. The real secret is just consistent application of pressure over a long period of time that will always lead to improvement. The group is going to be open for people to join all the way through the year, but obviously, in light of everything that we just discussed about laying the foundation for the people who join now and are with us through the whole journey, they're going to receive probably the most benefit to their performance. But if you hear about this from a friend and you want to join in May, June, July, you're more than welcome. We won't turn anybody away.